In the last 10 years, tattoos have become the norm. We're no longer shocked to see tribal bands, tramp stamps, sleeves, and even now face and neck tattoos in places like grocery stores, boardrooms, and PTA meetings. I'm joined today by two tattooers in Portland. We're here to dissect the tattoo culture craze and to ask, does it still carry meaning, or has it simply become a fashion trend or a way to be accepted? I'm Erin Donley, and this is Reveal What's Real. Welcome back to another episode of Reveal What's Real. Our mission is to remind the world of the good that's created when we can speak openly about the things in life that are hidden, uncomfortable, or difficult. Thank you both so much for joining me for this tattoo conversation.
Thanks for having us.
Seems timely. Yeah.
Thank you.
So here we are in Portland. There are roughly 120 tattoo shops. It seems almost as much as coffee shops around here.
Yeah.
What has happened in the last 10 years? Why this explosion? What's going on?
Tattoo schools, media exposure. Yeah, that's pretty much the base of it. I guess we can take off from there and tackle anything within that. But
Yeah. Basically, what's happened is you have hundreds of tattoo school graduates that nobody reputable wants to hire, so they open their own shops. And that's why we have all these tattoo shops in Portland. And what's unfortunate is that owning a tattoo shop or even working in one doesn't really mean that you're actually a tattooer. It just means that you've learned how to get a license. It doesn't mean that you can apply a decent tattoo. It just means that you've passed the test according to what the state wants you to know about tattooing.
So the everyday consumer almost isn't even aware of what's going on in this industry behind the scenes. So there's this whole, pretty much anyone can be a tattooer,
Yeah.
but also everyone's getting them.
Right, but in this day and age, I think that if you end up with a bad tattoo, it's your own fault. There's in this age of media, like we have the internet now, and everyone is like super educated about tattooing, like way more than we ever have been. And you can get online and there's Yelp reviews and whatever else, and you can actually turn on your television and sometimes see good tattooing. People should know what good tattooing is now and the difference.
there's articles to read. You can get online and just be able to go, how do I pick a good tattooer, in Portland or whatever. And I mean, there's ways now that weren't not available before of being able to educate yourself, and then just being able to identify what good tattoos are versus bad tattoos too. That's one of the things that seems to be somewhat elevating a little bit, but
Well, let's go there for a minute, because that is what's a good tattoo and what's not. And there, I'm sure you've just seen it all. And I mean, we've all seen people with like South Park characters or just something that seems kind of meaningless, Bob's Big Boy or something, is
I
that
think-
considered a bad tattoo?
Well, I mean, I think that comes down to if a person's happy with it, then it's a successful tattoo. It's really not for me to say what a bad tattoo is, but it comes down to how it's applied, really. The skill with which it's applied. Clean lines and solid shading and smooth shading, solid color.
good composition.
And something that's readable, something that you can tell what it is. Composition is super important, and placement on the body. And I think having a tattooer who's experienced with what it's like to be tattooed, what it's like to have tattoos in certain spots, and know what to expect through the healing process and through the life of the person wearing it. It's really important that you're dealing with somebody who actually knows what they're talking about.
Those that have tattoos, do they feel the need to tell the story of like what each of these things mean to? Is it more about impressing other tattoo people with, yeah, dude, I got this one. This is after my grandma died. This was my dog. This is whatever. Or are these stories more important to those who don't have tattoos to sort of legitimize why they did it?
It might have started that way, because I know, when I got tattooed, and maybe Seth too, I didn't do it for anybody else. I was decorating me. It's like picking out your clothes, and I like that. And I was designing my stuff and figuring out where I wanted things, and the story is just kind of maybe on hindsight, like kind of the symbology, like realizing like the depth of it and all that kind of became the storyline later. But I definitely had an idea first, but it seemed like all of a sudden people had to validate why they got tattooed. And I think that might have happened maybe in the 90s or so when the explosion started happening, because people had to like tread into waters that maybe they weren't really comfortable with.
Yeah.
So they had to have some tool base of like justifying why they got it, why they went through the process. And then like the whole thing, like with the TV shows, it's like, this psychic purging of like where they're healers, psychotherapists, and all of a sudden they come up and they just divulge all this stuff, and it's intense. Like
heavy.
you have to go
Yeah,
home
it sucks to
sometimes
carry
and
that
just
around.
kind of wash it out, because it's like, wow, how did I cross over from being an artist that applied something like that? I understand it's a really sacred thing for me, and it's for them as well, but like at some point, like I'm here to help in some way, but basically I'm a technician. I'm basically just putting artwork on you, and I'll do as much as I can to make it a really awesome experience, but that's about it. I don't know. I'm not in a qualified position to tell you how to
Like they're looking at you
mend
like a
your
shaman
life,
or
you
Yeah,
know?
that's about that's
or to how
about
to heal you.
when
Yeah.
I took a step back from that end of the business. When I stopped tattooing as much was right around the beginning of the craze of the television shows, when people came in with the same expectations that they would see on television, where there's somebody who come in, and
Ridiculous
they'd walk
expectations.
in and they'd say, I want a sleeve, and then a half an hour later their sleeve's done. And this is this nice new shiny thing that there was no like effort put into it really. They showed
Yeah, what about earning your tattoos?
Right, and they walk out with this thing, and when people started having that expectation of like sharing their life story with you and getting an instant giant tattoo, that's about when I started to take a step back and say, all right, maybe I need to not really be in this position so much, because it started to really lose its mysticism at that point and started to become really watered down. And when I started getting tattooed, it was a lot of it was to keep people from talking to me. It was to like it was to avoid people. It was kind of like don't talk to me. Like I wanted when I was 15 when I started getting tattooed, I wanted to look like a badass.
It was
and
a
nowadays
filtering system.
if you get tattooed on your throat now, you look like a barista. There's nothing that separates those who earned their tattoos from those who just like saved up money from
And want to look like everybody
working in a
else.
coffee shop, or their grandmother left them a trust fund or whatever, and they went out and got full sleeves.
Yeah, this is like what comes first, the chicken or the egg kind of thing. I mean, is it first that you want tattoos, and then you try to find symbols that have some meaning, or is it like, more of this symbol means so much to me, I need to have it on my body?
Yeah, I think
forever?
that happens.
I mean, so it's again, is this just another gray area that both occur?
I think that I think it both exists. They both exist because once in a while I'll have somebody say like, I really want this thing. I've always wanted this thing. I finally worked up the courage to get it. It means a lot to me, and I want it. I'm like, cool, rad, let's do it.
Yeah.
And then there's other people who are like, I don't care, just do something, whatever you want to do. And it's the same. I don't care either way. Like I'm happy for them as long as they're stoked on their tattoo. It doesn't make a difference to me. And I generally don't even notice other people's tattoos.
What I really like is the people that actually have invested some time, and not too much to where they're so kind of too controlling about it, but to the point where they're ready to surrender to an experience that is different and outside of their box, their comfort zone.
Yeah.
So it's the trends are really what kind of gets crazy. Like we were talking about earlier about, for me, it was Lollapalooza that actually came in and just homogenized the whole culture, the diversity of our culture of punk rockers
mid-90s,
to,
huh? That was the tipping point.
Yeah, and it was
Yeah.
like all of a sudden you go to a show now, and I rarely ever get inspired by anybody because everyone looks the same.
And this used to be a way to distinguish yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
So it kind of pisses you off a little bit.
Well,
or-
it's
I'm indifferent.
I'm indifferent now. Yeah, at first it was like when it first started hitting, because all of a sudden you had people coming up like, "Hey, we're buddies now." It's like, no, actually,
Yeah.
Like
People
I'm not
still
your
do that,
buddy.
though.
Like
They
I
still
still
wanna
need to
show
get
you.
to know you.
They still want to, look at the one I have, and you're like, cool, we both have tattoos.
Yeah,
Great.
it's in a bar and it's dark and I can't see it. So
Yeah.
what is that? It's like a segue into a
I'm
conversation.
stoked you have
or
some
something.
really terrible tattoo.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
So Seth, you're from the East Coast. You're a
West
West
Coaster.
Coaster, and so what kind of discrimination or judgment have you received because of your tattoos?
My
Like your
tattoos have gotten
parents
me out of
care?
trouble. Like my tattoos have gotten me out of trouble because I grew up in Baltimore, and it seemed like, when I got in trouble there a couple of times, and when I was spent the night in city jail, no one messed with me because I was covered in tattoos, and they all knew me as the tattoo guy. They're like, "Oh, you're the guy from the tattoo shop," and in situations like that, where maybe a couple of times having to go to court, I've been more inclined to cover my tattoos up, just out of paranoia, thinking that maybe there's it's not quite that acceptable just yet to where I'm gonna go in there with short sleeves on, flaunting that I have tattoos, and just try
Yeah.
to take advantage of the popular culture at the moment. I think that. And I do think that there's a time and a place for them, and I'm pretty private about my tattoos. It's odd for me to sit here with my sleeves rolled up right now. I generally have long sleeves on, even in the summertime.
Yes, it's like they're your own personal things.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I don't even think about them.
Do your parents care?
No, my mom's got a couple. My mom was getting tattooed in the 70s. My first exposure to tattooing was going with my parents to a tattoo shop in New York. and seeing them get tattooed, and I was around that quite a bit when I was little, and then as a skateboarder and like punk rock kid, like I was exposed to a lot of tattooing and a lot of that stuff, and that's what drew me to it, is it being counterculture, not that it was
outside of the norm.
Right, it wasn't popular, and that's why I wanted to do it. The whole reason I started skateboarding was because it wasn't football, it wasn't baseball, it wasn't a team sport. I didn't want a team sport. I wanted something that I could do by myself.
Individual.
And that's what tattooing was for me. It was like, I don't want to be part of your deal. I want to do my thing. Leave me alone, and I'll leave you
Surfing
alone.
was like that too. It's the
Yeah,
same
yeah.
thing. It's like, I think personality types maybe is what really made it unique before, and then because now it's homogenous, as I said earlier, like the idea of like once I saw Doc Martens being sold at Nordstrom's, I knew shit was wrong, like it was going hell in a handbasket,
Yeah.
because it's that whole thing of like when I got tattooed, it was to protect myself. It was to protect myself and filter people through. Like, if you were offended by me and thought I was really super hard, which I've had moments in my life I was really hard, but it was kind of like a way for me to get through and allow people that I thought, like that were more accepting and more open-hearted and not discriminatory towards me or judgmental, because it just kind of filtered. It was a natural filtering process of letting people in or out.
Absolutely.
I could see that.
So
Yeah.
What about when you did your neck tattoo? Did that take it to a different level? Like, did you ever get treated differently? Or
I got tattooed. It was kind of before, like, Jack Rudy did my Dave Gibson and Jack Rudy both did my necks quite a long time ago, when there wasn't a lot of girls with tattoos on their necks at all, or their hands, and it was definitely stepping out, because I'd always been a chameleon. Like, I always liked to be able to hide. I didn't really want to expose myself. And then when I actually made that leap into that, it was a little kind of disconcerting at first, because I was all of a sudden hyper aware of people paying attention to me
Checking
again.
it out, yeah.
And so then I kind of, softened that, and it doesn't bother me anymore. But it's for me, so I just kind of carried it through. But it was interesting to watch that shift again, because I'd already been pretty blasted. And then going through that, having people scoff at you in the middle of a grocery line and just look at you terribly, and it's like, whoa, okay, you have issues, like I'm not looking at you like that. You got blue hair, like really,
right.
come on,
Well, what about face tattoos though? Do you when someone wants one of those, do you cringe a little bit?
I don't do it.
Well, I
don't
think
do that
you have to take mental capacity and mental, like, where people are, like,
So
what
you,
are
like,
they doing
interview
it
'em.
for? I do. I want to know where their mental climate is, of like their sense of responsibility. If they're doing it just to say fuck off to society and all that, I'm not necessarily going to partake in that, because I don't want to curse you, and I'm part of you karmatically from here on out, and I do not want to have to like know that I allowed you to go jump in the hellfire, because people are going to totally treat you differently.
Yeah.
And I don't want to cause that suffering. So I'm really, really careful about that. Like we were talking about the Warped Tour stuff, where, kids were getting tattooed so they look like they're rock stars. You get them naked and you're like, where's the rest of you? Like, because you looked hot for a second. Now you're like, ugh, like, put your clothes back on, But it was like, because they wanted to have that image, and they wanted to portray that. But
It's called a Warped Tour bodysuit. It's just the hands and the throat.
Bodysuit.
Yeah, it's a neck warmer and fucking hand, gloves,
Mittens.
Yeah.
So maybe we should talk just briefly about tattoo removal, because I would imagine that some of these kids, are gonna want to get some of this taken off eventually. Do you have any idea about how much that costs, and what's the pain involved
Way
and the
less
time?
now, and
The cost has come down, but the pain hasn't. It's
No, it's very painful.
extremely painful. People don't always get the result they expect. It's not like they just hit it one time and your tattoo's gone. Sometimes the darker, larger stuff, certain colors,
Certain
can
colors.
take 12, 15, 20 sessions. And you're talking about, 8, 10 weeks, 12 weeks healing time between sessions.
It's like a third-degree
Wow.
burn. It's between a second to third-degree burn. So you really have to have some type of savviness on healing.
It can take years to get a tattoo removed. Years. And, when you see these kids with
Huge commitment.
covered in these tattoos, they're pretty much, they're screwed. They're not going to get all those removed. No one's going to sit there and remove all those tattoos. It's not going to happen.
Maybe they'll come up in the next 20 years with something that you can walk into, some type of like weird little photo booth and take it out, But,
Yeah, but you know what? The way that your body
works.
works, it wouldn't be remotely healthy to do that. The way that when a laser hits the pigment, it breaks it into smaller particles, and it's flushed out by your lymphatic system. Your lymph nodes can't handle all that. It's already bad enough that you're heavily tattooed. Your lymph nodes are already carrying all that pigment anyway.
Right, that was another question.
Everything
Yeah.
that doesn't get trapped under the skin, that
floats
gets sucked
through.
into your body, gets pulled into your lymph nodes. And when you remove the lymph nodes of somebody with a full bodysuit, they're black.
No way.
So, yeah, absolutely. So when somebody gets lasered, more of that is in their lymphatic system. And if you're
Open them
lasering
further.
huge amounts of tattoos, you're setting yourself up to be unhealthy. There's a lot of weird stuff in some of these pigments that people are using, a lot of heavy metals,
Yeah.
things, we're putting pigments into the skin. This isn't natural
Okay,
remotely.
yeah, this is another thing we just don't talk about
Yeah,
enough.
it's not even remotely natural. So you need to be careful with it.
So
and
do you also
respect it.
need to figure out, or do some tattoo shops have lower quality ink?
Some do. Some
Well,
don't even know what their
Yeah,
quality
tattooers
is. Like,
tattooers will use for the most part whatever's easiest, and most of the time, the commercially available inks, like I like to say pigments. I don't like to refer to them as inks because they're not. They're actually pigments, and when a pigment is properly prepared, it's fairly safe. It's actual pigment.
grade.
It's water. It's pigment, water, glycerin, and alcohol, and that's it. However, to make the job easier and to make the job faster, some people in the 70s decided that we could tattoo with acrylics. And there's, since then the popularity of these acrylics has grown exponentially with all these pigment manufacturers who are just buying these liquids from chemical companies and bottling them as tattoo ink. And they're not tattoo ink remotely. It's not remotely safe to put in your skin at all.
it might have been okay in the 70s for 1 or 2 tattoos. Your body could handle it, but full-scale body work, it's causing problems. I think there's a connection, perhaps, I don't know if I'm making the connection, but with lupus and different types of autoimmune issues and stuff like that, too, because the body's not able to handle it.
Yeah, it's so much. It's so heavy.
Wow. Now, what about the environment of tattoo shops? I mean, I grew up in Pittsburgh, not far from you, and we went to Ocean City, Maryland a lot, and it's like, everyone's getting drunk and going on the boardwalk
trash
and
weekend.
getting some, skull with a heart.
I got my first
mom,
tattoo
or-
in Ocean City.
Did you really?
In a hotel room when I was 15 years old.
I totally believe it. Yeah. So I'm sure that's changed over the years.
Yeah.
And like again, my friend back east was telling me like he brings his son. There's like a play area. It's
There's like a-
clean.
yeah.
There's music and
there's
so,
sage burning and the babysitter.
No,
and-
easy now.
Are there
It's
regulations though? I
Oh,
mean, like
yeah.
can
yeah.
someone show up wasted?
Well,
No, I mean,
the laws now are pretty across the board now. Like it's most all states are about 18. I think everyone's come up to par on that.
Chicago used to be 21.
Okay, so and then I was down in LA when all the big changes were happening down there, and it was like it was more. We were trying to keep it self-regulatory, like the certain shops, like even in Sacramento, we had the LA association that was just basically trying to make sure that everyone was keeping to proper standard, not reusing needles, not sterilizing equipment, not reusing pigments, all that stuff, and it was really interesting that we had to educate people to do that, but there is still a factor of people that are not educated that. And then the state took over, which, with some other people's influences and participation, to keep a standard here, which I think is good. I mean, everyone should be up on part of that.
Yeah.
So,
I don't know. I don't necessarily think that more government is always best.
No,
I think
I'm
that
not saying
in an
that, no.
ideal world, we'd be self-regulated. People would take care of the business that takes care of them. But most people don't. Most people actually need parents taking care of them and, scooting around wiping their butt,
Yeah.
to make sure that they're doing things right.
yeah,
And-
like, dude, did you just change that bag on that bottle? Well, no. Why? Like,
Yeah.
it's like, it's the conscientious factor of like you want to keep your people safe, like you're working, maybe doing 10,
Yeah, see, that's the only way we're going to
15
stay in business because, and that's what would bring this business down is infecting a bunch of people. Infecting
That
the
was
wrong
one of my
person.
questions.
That's what
Yeah,
happened in New
what
York.
could-
That's what got it outlawed in New York was the wrong person got hepatitis. And then next thing you know, it was illegal.
Shut
It
down.
became legal again years and years later, but it was illegal in New York for years and years because the wrong person got hepatitis.
Wow.
Yeah, in Boston, it was actually it was a felony for practicing a medical procedure without a license.
Yeah.
So I mean, there was some really, really heavy regulations that were trying to eliminate the procedure of tattooing in some states.
Yeah.
But
I mean, it's kind of a surgical process.
I think if I would rather have it be self-regulating, back like what it was back in the early 90s and stuff, and before the state got involved. But because some of the stuff that the state requires, at one point down in LA, they actually were trying to make it to where, everything had to be sterile. Well, we're working in an unsterile environment
Can't
no
work
matter
in a
what.
vacuum.
Once you open up a bag that's been sterilized, it's unsterile. Like you can only try to contain your area as much as possible. I mean, if they would have had it, they would have had us in white suits, like in these big, astronaut suits and sterile areas and whatever. And it's just, you can't, that's just
Might have
not-
been more fun though.
So if someone's watching this and they want to get their first tattoo, what should they look for when they walk into a tattoo shop? What ensures that it's going to be decent quality, a good, tattooer?
Yeah, I think that they need to like not only look at portfolios, but look at the people working there, and like just see that they're actually competent humans, like competent individuals.
Is there a chance for them to actually come in, say, "Can I have a conversation with you?"
Well, it's
Or
consult.
it seems like it's a really intimidating
Not
place
anymore.
to walk into.
Tattoo shops used to be intimidating,
Yeah,
and that's
not
kind
so
of
much anymore.
that's when it was more enjoyable, But
some of
now
us.
these days, it's totally normal for people to schedule an appointment to talk about a tattoo, not even get their tattoo. They're like, I've got an appointment to have a consultation with this person for an hour to talk about their tattoo, and I've never done anything like that.
I prefer
but I see it all the time.
I prefer it because I only have so much time in my day, and I want to make sure that I'm connecting with that person and that person's connecting with me. And
Yeah.
if there's not a connection, I can refer you because
Yeah.
I'm like, hey, this person's
Yeah.
actually going to be able to. You guys will really get along,
It's
or
way more
this is,
gratifying to see someone get a tattoo that's better than you can do. Like if somebody came to me and asked me for a portrait, I wouldn't do it because I'm not the portrait guy, but I want to see the tattoo that they got from the portrait guy. Like, man, go see my friend. He does amazing portraits. Get it from him and come back when you get it because I want to see this thing.
Yeah.
Way more gratifying than fucking up someone's tattoo for the sake of making the money.
Yeah.
I don't want their money.
Yeah.
I just want to see them get a cool tattoo because if in the big picture, that's what's better for the tattoo business. The more people who see really good tattoos, the more people are going to get tattoos. There are going to be less people that are turned off from it. So like when the majority of people were walking around with like fuzzy blue things on their arm and nobody knew that you could get anything better, it turned a lot of people off from it. And with the media came a lot of exposure to better tattooing, where people were like, oh, I didn't know you could get this sort of fine art. I didn't know that you could get this.
Well, the grocery line nowadays.
Yeah.
I mean, you got grandmas that are turning over, like you said, with your one friend, having a Batman sleeve and going home, and all of a sudden, how can grandma argue that that's not a beautiful piece of artwork? You know.
Yeah.
So they see you in the grocery line even now, and it's like
Yeah.
you see some beautiful floral thing with some elements of different imagery, and it makes your heart move because you're like, wow, that's really beautiful, and then you see it moving as a piece of artwork on the person. I really like the idea that we're all impermanent and that we just decorate ourselves and it's going to be gone, like
Yeah.
it's just
Yeah,
you put
people
your
say it's
artwork out
forever.
there
It's so not.
and it's gone,
It's
yeah, put it in the universe and just let it go.
My friend who has lots of really pretty tattoos, she just said, I just did it for the aesthetics. They don't even mean anything. She said, but I find
that's
that
cool.
I have to justify that.
No,
I just
not
wanted
really.
it because it was pretty.
I don't think-
That
I don't
she
think-
justified it by that.
Yeah,
you know?
I don't
It's
think that
something
people who
myself
really
with.
love tattooing need any sort of like justification for it, or I don't need anyone to justify their tattoos for me. And I think that if somebody says they got it for whatever reason, it doesn't matter as long as they're happy with it. I don't care.
It seems to be that's the difference between like trendy tattoo and real tattoo culture. It's like you do it for this like reason that's bullshit, or you do it for just yourself.
Yeah, and that's their problem.
Yeah.
It's like whatever.
And really, whose business is it anyway? Like, and I'm just kind of like, why are we so curious about this? Like, to each his own.
Yeah.
It's just getting, so I'm always interested in like, how is that impacting them in the real world, though? And
Yeah.
so
I try to be a good guide. You know what I mean? I try to step in and tell them. I'm usually curt. So if I don't like if somebody came to me with swastikas and whatever, I would say no. Because I've done that before in the past, and because at one point in my life I thought that I was just the instrument, and I didn't care because that person had the right to have their own belief system. I wasn't trying to
Yeah, but you're
get
part of it
engaged.
though. You don't want to get involved in that.
I don't want to. Yeah,
it is like carrying the energy of that.
Yeah,
It is,
it's circulating back into some negativity that I just don't want to be
I'm
associated
glad we
with.
touched on that. We just have about 30 seconds. Could each of you leave with like some kind of parting advice of what you'd like to see happen from this conversation?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, a lot of people these days want to become tattooers because they say they love it, but what they don't understand is that they're killing the business by loving it. They should take a step back from it and allow it to exist without trying to kill it, without trying to strangle it. Let this thing go and be its own thing without them trying to grab onto it and make it their own as well, because there's enough people taking care of tattooing without more people loving it.
Excellent. Thank you. What about you, Mikki?
And I would say just watch the trends. Just you can see it just through every city that goes on. Really reflect on it and make sure that it's a personal thing that you're expressing yourself, and not because you're getting tattooed because everyone else is tattooed. Like my boyfriend doesn't have any tattoos at all.
Oh,
It's
I like
pretty
hearing
awesome,
that.
Yeah.
That's so great. Thank
That's
you
great.
both so much. This has
Yeah,
been an
thanks for having
important
us.
conversation, I think. And thank all of you so much for watching another episode of Reveal What's Real. If you liked what you've seen here today, please like it, share it, comment. Tell us about your tattoo stories and what's behind the scenes for you. Thanks a lot. See you next time.